This is really, really a big honor and a privilege to, talk this afternoon with Venkatesh Hariharan, and he likes to be called as Venki, but I feel so junior when I look at you, sir, with respect to how much you have achieved, how much amazing work that you have done for so many different industries, so many different companies, right from Indian Express, Red Hat, Google, and the amazing things that you're doing at FOSS United and Open Invention Network. I don't know what right words I have to welcome you to my podcast, itishruti. So thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
inviting me. That's good enough.
Thank you so much. Sir, to understand more from you, and because you're very much in and around the tech policy space, I've created three questions for you, which I want to understand and learn a little more so that people who will be listening to you would understand this area a bit more. My first question being, your own career trajectory has been from different areas and arenas, right from journalism to corporate affairs to tech policy. I want to understand, are all of these very different, or are all of these actually the same?
I think the common thread for me was that I was very interested in technology for development. One of the things that I personally benefited enormously was because of access to the internet. And I think that literally changed my life because when I was a journalist, I met a professor from MIT. Because I had access to the internet, I kept in touch with him, and then one day, he had come to India. We were speaking, and he basically recommended me for a fellowship at MIT. It was called the Knight Science Journalism Fellowship, and I ended up being the first Indian to do that fellowship out of India. And I mean, it was an incredible opportunity, and without access to the internet, that would just not have happened. And after that, I always felt that, what are the technologies that can be brought back to India? So when I started, so I did we had to give a statement of purpose as to, that 1 year that you spend at MIT, what do you do in that 1 year? And my statement of purpose was to look at technologies that could be brought back to India for development. Uh, and then, I wanted to do a PhD in technology and socio-economic development, which did not happen. But when I was at MIT, I looked at a whole bunch of technologies, quantum computing, RFID was just being invented at that time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, of all the technologies that we saw, Linux, open source seemed to be the one that would be the most relevant to India. So when I came back to India, my friend Prakash Advani and I sat down, and I'd written an article titled "Why Linux Makes Sense for India," and I had said that Linux makes sense for India because you can customize it, you can localize it, and we should localize Linux to Indian languages. So my friend Prakash Advani reached out to me, and he said he's willing to support it because he was running a company called freeos.com. And then we hired a young developer called Karnakar to, work on the localization of Linux to Indian languages. And then there were these many linguistic groups that came up and started working on localizing Linux. So today, when you're installing Linux, you get a choice of about 17 languages, Indian languages. And if you, select Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, your user interface, completely changes into those languages. And partly, because of the work that we kicked off. So the common thread between journalism, tech policy, etc., has been, taking this incredibly powerful technology and seeing how it can be deployed for the benefit of the common man, the common everybody in India, basically.
I mean, I see this amazing inclination from your side towards technology. Like, was it very natural for you, or because of the MIT connection and talking about all these stuff back in the day, made you inclined towards the tech industry?
No, it was not natural. What happened is that I always liked reading. So I was a voracious reader and I still am a very voracious reader. So when I looked at what careers would work for me, I tried copywriting. I was, horrible at it. I mean, I got fired from my first copywriting job in 15 days.
You're too honest and kind to say that.
Then so I did a bunch of things. I did technical writing. I didn't like it much. It wasn't very creative. Um then I got into journalism, and my first article was on computers in medicine, and this was way back in '93, when all this CAT scan machines were coming in. So I met a whole bunch of doctors who were using computers at that time, and it was very fascinating. But in those days, I thought that technology journalism is literally the boondocks of journalism. The backwaters of journalism. So my logic was that maybe after a few years I'll go into mainstream journalism, maybe political journalism or business journalism. But in '95 the internet came, and VSNL launched the internet, and those used to be 9.6 kbps internet, and when you had a modem, you would it would screech, and that music is still ringing in my ears.
Yeah.
So you
And
had
if you get a phone
maybe
call, the way it would just go, like you can't use the landline phone. It is like the heartbeat of it. Yeah.
yeah. So that kind of got me very fascinated with technology. I mean, it was very clear that this is going to explode. And even in those early days, you could see slowly little bit of videos coming on Netscape browser and things like that. And there's just this excitement that was there as to this is going to become something big. So from instead of moving to mainstream journalism, I continued with tech journalism, and in '98, in '97, I got this. There's a extremely senior academic at MIT called Professor Ken Keniston, and he was doing research on e-government in India, and he once kind of told me, your country is very strange, because everywhere I go, I see user interfaces in the native language. If I go to China, the user interfaces in Chinese. So why is it that Indians don't create user interfaces in Indian languages? So that kind of set me off. Then I kept corresponding with Professor Ken Keniston, and he's basically was an anthropologist, and then he gave me a recommendation to the fellowship. Went to MIT in '98, '99. I came back. So yeah, I mean it's the long journey, but I think that kind of was one of the things that really kicked me off in terms of the open source journey.
Yeah. And what an amazing observation coming from an anthropologist, right? That why
Yeah.
are you guys so adamant about English, and why is it a stature for your country when you have several homegrown languages of your own? This makes
Yeah.
sense. And understanding and continuing on this journey from you, I want to understand something very pressing, which I feel for myself as well, that how can we involve, the common people or the users to participate in tech policies, rather than just asking them to click on a I accept button, which half of the crowd just clicks on without even reading the actual policies, right? I mean, I wonder if people actually read it. They just click
Yeah.
accept and move ahead. So, what do you think? Are there ways we can involve users and common man to get into tech policies?
Yeah, I think so. One is, of course, our own responsibility. I mean, I will say, my responsibility as somebody who's, part of FOSS United's public policy team is, I think, nurturing this next generation of leadership, which will, take this up. In fact, one of the things that we have not done very well in the open source community and the free software community is build this next generation of leadership. And I think, I think this time around, one of the most critical things that we have to fix is that, build a layer of leadership, the second rung of leadership, the third rung of leadership. So that will require, of course, a lot of mentoring, a lot of this. So that is, my a task that I have taken on to myself. But I think individuals also have to, start looking at the larger picture. I think either you are shaping technology or technology is shaping you. And today, if you look at all these discussions around AI, et cetera, these are some of the biggest questions of our day and age.
Yeah.
We think that the flow of technology cannot be stopped, but then the question is, are human beings more important, or is technology more important? In the US, there are discussions that automated driving will put 3.5 million truckers out of jobs. And I think this is where the larger societal questions come in. And one of the reasons that technologists need to be involved in public policy is because today technology is becoming, literally the thing that shapes our lives. I mean, in 95, the internet was such a tiny part of our lives. Today, the internet, we carry it around in our pockets. It's connected to our wristwatch, it is connected to our car. So we as technologists have a tremendous kind of responsibility to society. What we are doing is not just technology, everything that we do touches society. And a small example, Professor Ken Keniston was in Central America, and that's a collectivist kind of a society. So people were asking him, why is it that one person can use only one computer at a time? Why can't many children use the same computer at the same time? So that comes from the individualist Silicon Valley mindset that so these are the cultural assumptions that are embedded in the the genesis of technology. And so I think we have a huge responsibility to think about what happens to the technology when it reaches the hands of people. How is it going to be used? How is it going to impact people? And these are like, the most critical questions of our day and age.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't imagine having this conversation as enriching as I'm having with you, because literally you remind me of so many things, right? Because it reminds me of Kailash also, when even in the Mumbai FOSS event, you mentioned that sometimes we need to understand, do we really need to create this? It's coming from exactly the same, thought and conviction that are we really creating something right or wrong? And sometimes I wonder, the minute the internet goes, it's like food, water, and everything, right? Like you need it all the time. It's like electricity now. You can't live without it. So this totally makes sense, sir. And it actually, puts all the more importance as to how how much dangerous this can be at the same time as much as we are trying to leverage it. And gosh, this is really amazing talking to you. I want to understand one final aspect from you, which is with respect to FOSS or open source, right? Because there are so many users for it. But what I personally feel, like you mentioned about, the leadership gambit of it, I personally feel that there are a lot many takers and users for FOSS, be it individuals, be it students, be it organizations. But when it actually comes to contributing towards it, like how can we improve that landscape as well, right? Because they're just takers, not givers.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, one of the important things that we have to, change, and that's one of the responsibilities that we are looking at FOSS United. So I would say that, there are three levels of, maturity in the FOSS community. The first level is where you consume FOSS. The second is where you contribute back to FOSS. And the third is where you create your own FOSS projects. And, for people who are new to FOSS, who are entering the FOSS ecosystem, the message is that, if you're just consuming FOSS, that's also great. But if you really want to kind of be in a position where you can be hired by really good companies, then I think you have to start contributing back to FOSS. You have to start, contributing and maybe even creating your own projects. And I'll give you some examples. There are videos on YouTube of people who have contributed to FOSS, and because of that, they have been able to get extremely high-paying jobs at sitting out of India. Another example is there are few not the top run colleges, maybe the second tier or third tier colleges, but they had people who mentored the students to contribute to open source projects, and because those students contributed to open source projects, they were picked up by a ride hailing company at really good salaries. So I think there are a lot of things that are changing in the ecosystem. The opportunities. See, the thing is that also look at it from the project owners or the project managers perspective. If I want to hire people, the looking through resumes, filtering people out is such a huge job.
Yeah.
But if I see somebody who's working on my project, who's contributing consistently over a period of time, whose code is excellent, why would I not hire him? It's rather than go through this whole rigmarole of interviews, etc., etc. So I think this is going to be a huge tipping point for. So if I'm a student, I would number one, prioritize contributing to open source projects that I'm really passionate about, and use that as a stepping stone to get into really good companies to work with.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And while you're talking about students and everything, I think this conversation would be incomplete if I don't thank you for one thing, because like throughout the conversation, we saw how your writing directly, indirectly, during the 90s and maybe the early 2000s impacted the technology landscape, or your collaborations with the professors of getting native languages to Linux. When I got into engineering in 2007, my college moved from Microsoft and everything towards Linux, because the HOD of IT, Information Technology Department, he was very hell-bent on the fact that we would be using everything that is open source. So I think my generation is standing on, the efforts on your shoulders, really, because had it not been for people like you who would have advocated these things and understood the necessity of open source and FOSS maybe in general with respect to how it can help India, I wouldn't have been having something like that as an experience in my college. So, just want to thank you, sir, for all the immense contributions that you have done. And thank you for answering very, very hard hitting questions that I created for you when I was getting the best of best. I wanted to ask, all the burning questions which I had, and I didn't know who to ask these really. In case you feel I haven't asked you anything which you felt I should have asked, or in case you think that we need to also say something to people who are listening to us, please, the platform is all yours, sir.
Yeah, the last bit of what I want to say is this, that I think we really need to change our own thinking as a society. One is, I think we need to have a lot more empathy towards others. We need to, I think we need to be a society that is, not just high in IQ, but also high in EQ, and we also need to be a society that really thinks far ahead. So there is, I think, a Red Indian saying that, if you're making a decision, think of what will be the impact of that decision 7 generations down the line. And unfortunately, I think we have lost that capability, and we are now thinking quarter to quarter. We are thinking extremely short term as a society. And unless we change that, I think we are headed for disaster. So every technology question, every, life question that we have, if we just think, what is the most convenient path forward, instead of asking what is the best path forward for all of us as a society. I think without that fundamental shift in mindset, I think we are going to be, a society that lurches from one problem to the other. Sometimes I think humanity is a society that, digs a ditch, falls into it, and then tries to climb out of it. Unless we have long-term thinking, we'll always be finding these problems. You consume single-use plastics, and then suddenly, you have a plastic swirl in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is bigger than the state of Texas. So let us be a lot more thoughtful. Let us be a lot more, kinder to ourselves, to society, and to the planet. And of course, I can talk on this for hours, but
Same here. Same here. You have literally hit the Pandora's box, and I want to talk so much more really on this one also, because what hurts me the most is we used to be a very humanitarian society, right? India, Bharat, whatever you may want to call it. We are probably deemed as the emotional fools of the world, and we probably were, we probably are. But I think that is what kept our civilization sustaining, right? We are one of the greatest, oldest civilizations the world has ever seen. And it is still here when so many of them just wiped off or were wiped off. And this is such an important thing. If only we understand the importance of empathy and EQ. And I'm going to say something which came to my head when you were talking about this, and which probably might not resonate in a good way with most. Is I think the moment when Bangalore became the Silicon Valley of India, while it really helped us boom with respect to IT and the outsourcing and getting the number of jobs, I think as much as America has created its own Frankenstein, I think we also created our own Frankenstein, because not just it changed the entire physical and geographical landscape of that place, but it kind of shook the heart of our nation. And now all of us, we need is instant gratification, instant like, instant followers, instant money. Like you talked about the quarter to quarter thing, but then you're like, oh my God, what's my valuation? So yeah, I think this is
yeah,
our own Frankenstein.
yeah. In fact, so many years ago, my sister actually moved to Bangalore,
Okay.
and so she was looking around the house, and she was looking to rent a house, and she looked around, and she asked the broker, "Why is there no fan here?" So because coming from Bombay,
Yeah.
we are used to having a fan, and that guy said, "We don't need fans in Bangalore." And this was, of course, 15, 20 years ago. And from that point to today, what has happened in Bangalore is absolutely horrible. I mean, today people are having to buy air conditioners, not just fans, in a place where you did not even need a fan.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great illustration of the kind of short-term thinking that we have as a society. Sometimes, for example, when you walk into our concrete houses from outside, you feel that the temperature inside the house is actually 2 degrees hotter than outside.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so these
The
concrete,
photos. Oh God.
yeah, the concrete absorbs heat throughout the day, and then at night it releases it, and then you switch on the AC to balance that out. So again, you kind of, the same example, you dig a ditch, you fall into it, and you try to climb out of it. So yeah, I just hope that in my lifetime we can see, I'm 53. In my lifetime, I hope that we see a world which is a lot more thoughtful, a lot more methodical, lot less short term, uh, and lot kinder, and lot more compassionate to the entire society. We'll
I'm,
work towards it. We'll keep
yes,
pushing.
absolutely. I'm trying my best from my end. You're trying from yours. I hope we continue doing this so that by the time hopefully I reach 53, there is some change.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. This was
Thank you.
thank
Thanks
you.
for having me on the call, on the show.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.